There's a Collins Foundation report for our final week. It's not the final report, but we are headed into the last 3 days. I have recorded probably 4 or 5 videos that, due to one technical issue or another, didn't go out. Sorry. I had a great viewer mail segment, which of course is all fictitious. I did some stuff outside, and boy, the technical side of this has been wacky, to say the least. I want to talk about everyone's least favorite subject, which is 1840. Now, I'm sorry, it's great. I know that a lot of people really dislike this section of the series. I have now been immersed in Dark Shadows for 2 years, more or less. And in all of that time, I've gotten to know it pretty well. And I've gotten to know the criticisms of 1840. I know that Wallace of Collinsport Historical Society and I and some other people had talked on a podcast, perhaps, about us doing an 1840 podcast where I would be the defender of it. And I want to talk about that stuff right now. 1840 gets criticized because it's humorless. Yeah. I mean, you know, after you've dealt with people like Stokes and Petofi and all of that, things are going to be humorless. That's just a tough level to reach, and they're not going for laughs. Neither did Skyfall. Not everything has to be funny, and this is certainly something that isn't. Although Gabriel gets in some really good one-liners in the in the 1150s somewhere, I think, maybe, which I wasn't expecting. So yes, it's humorless. It gets criticized for retelling a lot of parts of the series. Okay, we'll talk about that. And it also gets criticized for the fact that it moves really quickly. I want to talk about that. I think one of the disorienting things about it is that it introduces a lot of new characters, or it furthers a lot of new characters, and by new characters I mean new actors. Daphne is pretty new, Roxanne Drew is relatively new, Virginia Vestoff is pretty new. There is a lot of shake-up. There's not a lot for Nancy Barrett to do. There's not a lot for Joan Bennett to do. There's not a lot for Louis Edmonds to do. Although his character of Daniel, I think, is a fusion of the best qualities of all of his characters. So I think that's part of it. I want to very quickly talk about the issue of it moves so quickly and it's confusing. Well, it's not confusing if you pay attention. The writers knew what they were doing. This isn't Amateur Night in Dixie. You have to pay attention to this show. It has a lot of plot threads. I haven't counted them, but it may have more plot threads than the average Dark Shadows storylines. It has a ton. I think that's in its favor. It has a lot of characters running around. It is like a very serious version of a Jack Davis painting that you might have seen in Mad Magazine or something. It has a lot going for it. It doesn't move too quickly. I don't know. If you like Dark Shadows where something new happens in every episode, and having watched this for 2 years, yeah, I kind of do like a Dark Shadows that has something new going on in every episode. If that's what you want, 1840 is the place to go. If you want a Dark Shadows where you only need to check in about twice a week to catch up with the story, it's not a place where you want to go. But now we have pretty good standards for what smart, arc-driven television can be. And we deserve something where stuff happens in every episode. I don't see what the problem is with that. My attitude towards that is, you're welcome, from Dark Shadows. You know, that they're letting you eat at the big kids' table. They're moving the plot along. So I like that a lot. One of the other criticism, I think, is that it is reconfiguring a lot of parts of its own story. In other words, it's recycling. Absolutely. But it's doing so in a very interesting way. Keeping in mind that it's not as much raw fun as something like 1897, it does have the advantage of much more likable characters. I really had remembered it as being populated by fairly dislikable characters, and it's not. Far more than huge swaths of 1897 where almost everybody's a jerk. In 1840, you have a lot of good eggs. You seem to have an equal balance. if not more good people than rotten people. That's a real relief. Along the fact that it does move quickly. If you pay attention to it, it moves pretty fast. But in terms of it being a retelling of itself, Dark Shadows found its bread and butter in retelling classic stories. I mean, Dark Shadows brags about it. You know, you're going to get some Turn of the Screw. You're going to get your Jane Eyre. You're going to get, obviously, Dracula. You're going to get Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You're going to get all of this stuff. And my argument is that in many cases, forgive me, canon of Western literature, but Dark Shadows does it better. Maybe it's because they have more time. Maybe it's because I just like the characters more. Maybe because it's characters with whom we have a long-standing investment going through these story arcs and experiences. Whatever the reason is, Dark Shadows, if it doesn't do it better than the original authors, does a cracking good job with it. Well, now Dark Shadows does that with Dark Shadows. Dark Shadows in 1897 basically steps back and says, you know, if we could tell the story of a curse turning a Collins family member into a monster involving romance gone awry and all of these things, and him then showing up in the present and causing chaos, knowing everything we do now, how would we do it? And thus you get 1897 as opposed to the Barnabas storyline. They have given themselves a lot more creative permission. In 1840, it feels like they're fusing 1795 and 1897, but it also feels like while they're cannibalizing themselves, they are creating a more and more refined draft. I think it's a more interesting witchcraft story. You have a more interesting set of villains. You have a more renowned witch. You have someone who can speak up for himself in an intelligent manner in Quentin, the person who's going to be put on the stand. I see so many things in it that are improved versions of what's gone before. And that's a dangerous thing to say because it sounds like I don't approve of what they've done before. And I do. I love it. And if you could stick Count Petofi in this, I would be thrilled. If you could stick Magda in 1840, I'd be over the moon. Carl Collins, please. Although it's great to see John Carlin playing a character of real character and backbone. It's just marvelous. So those are reasons why I'm really loving 1840. 1840 is tough to write because it's not funny. There's not a Petofi who every time I knew I was going to be writing a Petofi entry, I knew I was in for fun. Every time I write a Stokes entry, I know I'm in for fun. I know that something really cool is going to happen. That cool factor isn't there as much. So I'm getting through the soap opera stuff as best I can, and I'm really trying to set up the final phase of the Barnabas Angelique story.